Ravenwood High was the kind of school that looked haunted even in broad daylight. The paint peeled from the walls like sunburnt skin. The windows were fogged with age, and the long, endless hallways smelled faintly of damp wood and old dust. Most students joked about ghosts wandering the corridors at night, but nobody really believed the stories. Well, not until the day the last bell rang for good. It all started on a Friday, right before midterm break. The air in the school was thick with tension. You could almost taste the stress of exams, the bone-deep exhaustion, and the whispered rumors that filled every corner. Among the students was Lena, a quiet girl who always stayed behind after class to work on her art projects. She loved the silence, the peace that settled over the school when everyone else had gone home. That day, however, the silence felt wrong. It was too heavy, too alive. When the final bell echoed through the halls, Lena slowly packed her sketchbook, her eyes drifting up to the flickering fluorescent lights above. The janitor, a kind, weathered man named Mr. Harris, waved at her as he began locking the heavy back doors. "Don't stay too late, kid," he said, his voice raspy. "This place gets strange after dark." Lena just offered a polite, non-committal smile. She'd heard that warning a million times, from almost every teacher who worked late, but she had a deadline to meet, and the art room felt like her second home. Or so she thought. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the campus, the school grew unnaturally quiet. The slow, rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall sounded louder than her own frantic heartbeat. Lena put in her earbuds, cranked up her music, and tried to lose herself in sketching the empty classroom. She didn't notice the first sign of trouble, a faint tapping on the window. Asterisk, tap, tap, asterisk. It was soft, almost polite. When she finally looked up, there was nothing there, only the dark glass reflecting her own face, pale and wide-eyed, staring back. She shrugged it off, blaming her overactive imagination and the stress of midterms. But the tapping continued. This time, it wasn't from the window. It moved to the opposite wall, as if something or someone was walking outside, slowly circling the room. Her music suddenly seemed very far away. Then, the hallway lights began to flicker erratically. One by one, they went out, plunging the school into a dim, unsettling orange glow from the emergency lighting. That's when she heard the footsteps. Slow, heavy, and deliberate. They echoed from down the hall, each step a drumbeat of dread. "Mr. Harris," she called out, her voice trembling and small in the vast emptiness. There was no answer, just the echo of her own fear. Clutching her phone like a lifeline, she stepped into the hallway. The flashlight beam cut a sharp, nervous path through the darkness, illuminating rows of silent lockers and torn, faded posters. And that was when she saw Ita's shadow at the far end of the corridor. It was tall, impossibly tall, and shaped all wrong, as though it didn't belong to any human form. As she shakily moved the light toward it, the shape simply vanished. At that exact moment, her phone screen flickered and the flashlight died, leaving her in near total darkness. Panic began to bubble in her chest. She started walking faster, her shoes echoing sharply against the linoleum floor. She turned a corner and froze. The trophies inside the glass display case had been rearranged into strange, unnatural patterns. Some were upside down, others turned backward. A few were even shattered. And scrawled across the glass in what looked like red marker were the words, "The bell never stops ringing." Lena's breath hitched in her throat. The last bell had already rung hours ago. Yet suddenly, as if summoned by the words, she heard it again, a faint, distant chime, echoing through the empty halls. Asterisk, ding, ding, dinged. Asterisk, her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic prisoner. The sound grew louder, closer, as if it was hunting her. She turned and ran, sprinting toward the main exit, her only thought to get out. But when she reached the heavy double doors, the lock was sealed tight. She pulled, she twisted, she even kicked it with all her might, but it wouldn't budge. Then, a glint of metal on the floor caught her eye. The janitor's keys. A wave of relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. She picked them up. The cold metal was covered in something thick and sticky. Lifting her phone to the faint emergency light, she tried to see what it was. Her breath caught in a silent scream. The keys were stained with blood. Desperate, Lena dashed into the science wing. The acrid smell of chemicals and dust hit her like a physical blow. She scrambled into one of the classrooms, fumbling with the lock and slamming the door behind her. For a few precious moments, she thought she was safe, leaning against the door, gasping for air. Then she noticed the faint hum coming from the overhead speakers. A voice crackled through the intercom, a soft, distorted whisper, barely audible. "Class is still in session." Her blood ran cold. The speaker fizzed, and then she heard laughter, strange, childlike giggle, twisted and warped by the static. Around her, desks began to shift on their own, scraping loudly across the floor. The classroom door behind her began to rattle violently. Something was trying to get in. Lena backed away until her shoulders hit the chalkboard. She glanced over her shoulder. On the dusty black surface, new words were appearing, drawn by an invisible hand. "You should have left when the bell rang." She ran down the stairs, through the cavernous gym, past the dark and silent cafeteria. Every hallway looked wrong, stretched too long, with corners that shouldn't exist. It was as if the school itself had changed shape, twisting into an impossible maze designed to trap her. And all the while, the bell kept ringing in the distance, sometimes near, sometimes far. Each toll sent a fresh wave of terror through her. Then, in the hellish red glow of an exit sign, she saw movement again. It was Mr. Harris, standing at the end of the hall. Relief, pure and overwhelming, flooded her chest. "Mr. Harris," she cried, running toward him, tears streaming down her face. But as he slowly turned to face her, she stopped dead in her tracks. His eyes were black, hollow pits, voids of darkness. His mouth hung open in a silent, eternal scream. As she watched in horror, his body twitched, jerked unnaturally, and then collapsed into a pile of fine gray ash that scattered on the floor. Behind her, the bell tolled again, loud and final. Asterisk, ding, Asterisk. Lena spun around and saw them. Figures emerging from the shadows, students in old, faded Ravenwood uniforms. Their faces were pale and waxy, their eyes completely empty. They walked slowly, their heads tilted at broken angles, whispering words she couldn't understand. One of them, a girl with long dark hair, reached out and touched her arm. The skin where she touched burned with an impossible, ice-cold fire. Screaming, Lena ran for the nearest door, flung it open, and stumbled into the library. The towering shelves loomed over her like tombstones, and the air was thick with the smell of decaying paper. In the very center of the room stood an old school bell mounted on a wooden frame. It was small, rusted, and seemed to be vibrating softly, as though it was ringing without making a sound. Mesmerized, she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers brushed against the cold metal, the world tilted on its axis. The lights went out completely, and the whispering stopped. For a long, terrifying moment, there was only absolute silence. And then a single, faint chime echoed one last time. Asterisk, ding. Asterisk. The next morning, the teachers arrived to find the art room lights still on. Lena's sketchbook lay open on the table. On the final page, she had drawn the school perfectly detailed, every window, every hallway meticulously rendered. But in the center of the drawing, she had sketched dozens of shadowy figures, all of them staring out of the page at whoever was looking. Lena was never seen again, and yet sometimes, long after the last bell rings at Ravenwood High, the janitors swear they can still hear footsteps in the hall and the faint, lonely scratching of a pencil from the empty art room. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another descent into the darkness. Until next time.